We head now to Hawke's Bay to look at an industry initiative supported by MPI through the Sustainable Farming Fund, regional councils and other industry members. Actual nutrient losses are being measured under acknowledged good management practices countrywide. Arable, vegetable and forage systems are being studied, as well as mixed cropping and grazing operations.
This is probably the first real crack at looking at nutrient losses, multiple crops, multiple sites, multiple seasons, to build up a real measured loss, if you like, rather than a modelled loss. Really important that we do that to, I guess, validate our models, to validate our good management practices that farmers are using, and just to get a better handle on how systems are performing. A really important issue for the industry and regional councils at the moment is how do we get the right balance between economic prosperity from the land as well as take care of the environmental aspects as well. So yeah, really important and well timed for that to inform discussion. This is the second year of the project. We've got sites located in the Canterbury region, Manawatu region, Hawke's Bay and also up north in Waikato and Auckland. Each of the sites are going to be in the ground for at least 3 years, and we're hoping that the network will sort of endure and the information that's coming will be of real benefit to growers and councils who are involved. We've kind of worked with the growers to identify something that's typical of their rotations. We've installed flux meters at depth, and then we capture drainage water, measure that drainage water through time to pick up the nutrients that are in it. What we're seeing at the moment is that in a number of situations that the good management practices are really resulting in small losses, and the next step is to really test that against models and compare the outputs of kind of what we've measured against what the models predict.
We're farming just over 2,000 hectares. 800 hectares is really in cash cropping, some mix between processed vegetables and cereals and seed, and then the rest of the property is in finishing beef and lambs. A lot of the work I've done off farm has been around nutrient management and things like that. So I suppose just following on, and a lot of our research dollars of all industries is going into how we manage within limits and do things. And so it was naturally interesting to see what it is. I think we have to be real and say that the current model overseer was designed for one thing, and a lot of work in developing it to be a decision support sort of model for FERT recommendations in the pastoral sort of area was what it was designed for. And you know, it's done a good job at that. So now it's being moved into, you know, one to sort of more of a regulatory tool and across all types of farming and soil types. So obviously you're going to find some gaps.
So yeah, just great to look at your results. Obviously your site here, very low drainage through the summer and summer months. Does that kind of line up with what you're expecting?
Yep.
Yep.
For the last 20 years, a lot of the stories here have been around, you know, reduced tillage or different ways of cultivating or establishing crops. So we've always been sort of looking at how do we maintain soil structure, soil quality, how do we get, you know, the best crops with the least amount of sort of cultivation. You know, we've got variable rate irrigation on most of the irrigators now to try and use the best technology to get a good result. And that's all, you could argue, best practice. So it's interesting here, if we can't make best practice work and actually keep under the limits, then either there's going to be a major change in how farming goes on or productivity from the land. And so I suppose in that respect it's been quite interesting seeing our sort of preliminary results out of this flux meter project to see that we're actually staying well down on the numbers that we need to be. So one would argue that yes, the best practice we're entertaining at the moment does work. I think we have to be careful. I mean, over this area here, this is a sandy type soil, and so hence we can do the crops like the carrots, which is probably the only crop we actually cultivate for. So it was interesting to do it in this area because that's the one area that we probably are doing some damage to the soil structure, and so potentially, you know, losing carbon, allowing more drainage and less lock-up sites for the nutrients. So, you know, if we're going to have a risk area, this is probably going to be it. So it's been good to see that we have stayed under in this area.
The good practices that Hugh is obviously implementing, good emphasis on soil testing, matching demand with supply, good irrigation practices to really reduce the risk of leaching losses, and also just cover crops over the winter to sort of lock up any nutrients that's sitting there so that he can use it again next year. So what we've got here is a flux meter made of PVC pipe. They've been installed in the ground at about 1 metre depth. So we auger out the soil and slot this in, repack the soil. Sits in there permanently. Through the winter and the summer months, any drainage is intercepted at the top of this and then is stored in this here tank. When we come out and sample, we connect up pipes, use a pump here and basically pull the solution back to the top where we can then analyse it for different nutrients. It can stay there for an extended period, can sit below the root zone of crops and below implements that run through the field, so there's no risk of it being cut up as Hugh works in this field. There's been a lot of science done on the processes. Where this project adds value is probably the length. So 3 years, multiple crops, you start to get a good look at a whole system rather than just one particular crop.
And we have a policy of running the soil test levels at around sort of mid-20s to 30s on the Olsen test in terms of phosphorus level. And then we just try and grow the crops on a demand basis, so it's sort of what we remove we'll put back in, so we try and keep them there. And I think having modest levels stored in the soil versus getting the right moisture going in at the top is going to, one, limit the loading on the soil to hold on to things, and two, the chances of it getting washed through from excess water. So again, it's just good practical management steps that actually make us money, because we're not putting a whole lot of money in the ground in terms of fertiliser that doesn't necessarily need to be there, and we're getting good results with the crops. Certainly there is concern, especially around the nature of the cropping, especially annual cropping being a very short-term thing, that a model that is really a long-term average model, doing short-term crops is quite hard to do. And so there is other projects in the WIN looking at what is the best model necessary to monitor cropping practice, or do you just go with some of the areas those in Canterbury with the matrix of good management and sort of just use numbers that people discern as being a sort of a good outcome. I mean, there's all sorts of ways, but again, all of these are being validated at the moment. I mean, it hasn't been that long in the pipeline, so I think a lot of research is getting around how the best way to handle it is and working it out. And I think, to be fair to the funding group here, I mean, we've got regional councils, we've got Plant and Food, obviously, we've got Ravensdown and FAR and Hort NZ all supporting this. And I suppose it's, they're showing a concern to get it right. And I think that's the big part. It's not really saying something wrong or something right, it's actually let's find out what's actually happening and then make sure that the models are getting it pretty close, and if not, well, let's go and have a look and see. And I don't think anybody, even the owners of Overseer, are against that sort of approach.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.